Hi guys, it's Nick, the ASMR nerd. Welcome to another episode of Relaxing Reviews. Today we're going to be taking a look at, surprise, more mechanical keyboards. Bet you didn't see that coming. But today's keyboards have something very special about them, and that is that they have user replaceable or user swappable mechanical switches. And this is really cool because oftentimes when you go to buy a mechanical keyboard, the hardest decision is what kind of switches you want to get, because you're kind of locked into your choice with most keyboards. You know, you're stuck with that switch for the lifetime of the board, or until you decide to swap it. And if you're a first time buyer, you might choose a switch that it turns out you're not thrilled with. Or even if you are experienced using mechanical keyboards, perhaps your tastes for switches change over time. And so it's really neat to have the ability to swap out switches on the fly. And that is exactly what is offered by the keyboards that I'm looking at here today. These keyboards are called the MechanicalEagle Z-77 and Z-88. Now, the Z-77 is a 10 keyless version, and the Z-88 is a full-size 104 key version. Otherwise, they're both fairly similar. They're both fully mechanical boards. They both have fully swappable switches. They both have fully programmable RGB backlighting, and they both fall firmly within the budget keyboard category. The full-size Z88 sells for about $50 US, and the 10 keyless Z77 is available for about $5 less at the $45 US price point. So, as I mentioned, the most compelling feature of these boards is that they offer these user swappable switches. With most mechanical keyboards, you could swap switches if you really wanted to, but you'd have to get your hands dirty with desoldering and resoldering, and it's not a straightforward process. The Z77 and Z88 boards actually have sockets into which you can simply plug the switches and unplug the existing switches. It makes it really easy to swap switches on the fly, and if you really wanted to, you could even have a blend of different switches across your board. Maybe for your alpha keys, you want very tactile, clicky blue switches perhaps, whereas for your modifier keys you want some softer browns or something like that. You have the option to do that with these boards, which I think is pretty cool. Now, these are not the only boards that offer this kind of functionality, but there aren't that many to choose from out there on the market. So I'm pretty happy to have these in for review, and I hope you enjoy what we do here today, taking a look at them. I should also point out a very quick word on branding when it comes to these boards. As you might have noticed watching these reviews or other videos like them, the budget keyboard world is, in the words of Linus, it's a little bit inbred. Actually, it's a lot of bit inbred, and there's a lot of sharing of parts that goes on. You've noticed very similar keycaps with very similar legends across many of the boards I've reviewed here on the channel. But beyond that, there's a lot of straight up rebranding and repackaging and resale at different price points under different names and brands. And it can get really confusing for the consumer to know what they're getting, or if they're getting the best possible deal, especially when the same thing is sold under different brands. Now, the keyboards that I'm looking at here today are both sold under the MechanicalEagle brand. I've also seen them sold under the E-Element brand. The particular boards that I have here today, these review samples, were provided to me by an Amazon seller called Granvela. These are available on their store under the Mechanical Eagle branding, but they are also available elsewhere, as I mentioned, under different brand names sometimes. But the key naming convention that seems to be common across all these different rebrands of these boards is the Z-77 and Z-88 naming scheme. So that's one way that you can, search for them if you want to look up more about them. There are, of course, I like to remind you, links down in the video description that you are welcome to click through on if you like what you're seeing as this review progresses. That'll take you right to Granvela's page selling the Z-77 and Z-88. And of course, down in the video description, there is also timestamps if you want to jump around this review a little bit. So, with all that said, let's take a closer look at the MechanicalEagle Z-77 and Z-88 keyboards. Let's start off with the Z-77. This is, as I described, the smaller of the two boards. It's a 10 keyless design. It comes in this nondescript cardboard box, which is somewhat reminiscent of the minimalistic packaging employed by Aukey in their products, like we've seen in other videos, although this one is significantly more Chinese. But as you can see, it does identify it as the Z-77. It does call it a keyboard. And up here is what I must assume is the MechanicalEagle logo, since that is how it's branded. And there is a little sticker here. I don't know if you can see that particularly well, but it's a little semi-holographic sticker that I guess is supposed to be maybe some kind of seal of genuine quality. I'm not quite sure. On the end here, it has a list of switches, and interestingly, we have green switch checked off here. That's somewhat curious because this particular board is equipped with blue switches from the factory. They are still, of course, user swappable, but by default it comes with the blues. I do notice, however, that blue is not listed there. We have green, black, brown, red, or purple switches, which I have never heard of before. So I'm thinking that green is their equivalent of a blue switch, perhaps. We'll see what the actual switches themselves look like and respond like when we take the board out. Over here we have a little barcode, and it simply says 87 RGB black, so it's 87 keys, RGB backlighting, black chassis, made in China, of course. On the back here we have a bit of English information, a bit of Chinese information, but nothing particularly interesting. Let's take a look. Gives the address for the manufacturer. It says here, the packing contents, outer appearance, properties, and detailed specifications may be updated owing to the operating circumstances and requirements. We will not inform again. That is very cryptic. I do not know what exactly that means. Eastern Times Technology Company, it says here on the back. Based on the E-element concept, to serve our customer the better product, we choose raw material of excellent quality and deliver all our efforts to to make this splendid product. So, and then I think similar things in Chinese. So there's really very little information there about the keyboard itself. None, actually. And that's it. That's all that's on the outside. So not much to see there, but let's open it up and see what we've got inside. Inside we have my favorite, bubble wrap. The keyboard actually looks fairly well protected. It's got bubble wrap, and then below that it's got a sort of a foam bag. So let's see if we can lift it out here without causing too much of a ruckus. Okay, so the cable, USB cable, is under this bit of cardboard. Sort of tucked under. You can hear those little clicky blue switches as I lift it out. We'll take a look at the board in a moment, but first, a user guide and a baggie, inside of which we have some interesting items. Let's take a look at those. I'm going to get this box out of the way first, though. So we've got a bubble wrap bag, and inside the bubble wrap bag we have the conventional keycap puller, which we see in pretty much every mechanical keyboard package. It's an easy pack-in. Why not, right? This one's in red. But then we also have a metallic puller. This, I believe, is for the switches themselves, because these are, of course, user swappable switches. So it's got little hooks on it for pulling out a switch. And then, somewhat generously, a collection of spare switches. And we can tell from a close inspection here these are, in fact, Outemu Blues. Can you read it there? Maybe? No, not quite. Reads Otemu right above the stem there, anyway. So these are Otemu blues. They have the conventional reinforced stem that is characteristic of Otemu blues. And of course the blue stem, so they're definitely blue switches. I do not know why they're checked off as greens on the packaging, but that's fine. As long as we know we're buying blues. And on the underside here we can see the contacts. 1, 2. And these are what will slot in and make contact with the sockets on the board. Very nice. And we're provided with five of these spare switches. That's fairly generous. I've actually never seen spare switches included with a board before, but of course most boards you can't replace the switches easily, so it's nice that they included those, just in case, you know, a switch isn't working properly or something breaks. Okay, so move those aside. We'll take a quick peek at the user guide here. Product installation, plug and play, USB interface, no driver or software. Product features, ergonomic design. Full keys non-conflict, so they are advertising full and key rollover, anti-ghosting there. Double shot injection keycaps, always nice to see. High quality button switches, yes. LED lighting modes, there are a variety, as one might expect. 10 different backlighting modes, in addition to different colors. Some keyboard shortcut here. Gaming preset lighting modes, which I believe we've seen these same lighting modes on other boards, haven't we? I seem to recall perhaps Aki's KMG3 had these same shortcuts, and perhaps Moto Speed's the CK104 might have had these same keyboard shortcuts. Don't remember exactly, but those look awfully familiar. Or I guess lighting, I should say. They're not shortcuts, they're lighting configurations. Lots of other function keys, multimedia shortcuts. What's this? A warranty card. Oh, well done. Well done. So these guys do in fact include explicit information about the warranty, which I am quite thrilled by because I am sick of finding boards with no information about the warranty. It reads here, thanks for trust and support. E products, I assume that's E element. We will provide our best service for you. If customers buying the E element products through legal channels, we will provide 12 months warranty. Very well then. Now that being said, I don't know who you contact, but at the very least it does state there that it's warranted for 12 months, so that's something. And then the rest of this guide appears to be in Chinese. Gets the job done. Okay. Time to look at the board. Alrighty. So this is the MechanicalEagle Z or Z-77 mechanical keyboard. And my very first impression of it is that it is dense. This is something I've said about other boards, but this might take the cake actually. It is remarkably heavy and solid feeling for its size. This backplate is solid metal. It's unambiguously metal. There's a couple of screws, one in each corner here. And then the back. Why? The back is plastic. It actually has a scratch on it. That's funny, but not much of a problem. It is on the back after all. Yeah, the back is a textured sort of matte plastic, and it's got these goofy, like, tribal tattoos, which seem totally unnecessary. But anyway, there they are. As you can see, we've got feet. Always good, always good. Something I always look for. They've got a little rubberized feet, so it shouldn't slide. Same down at the bottom here. Little rubberized pads. A little bit of information, let's read. It says current, less than 500 milliamps, model, Falcon Z-77. That's funny because I've seen this referred to as a MechanicalEagle, but never the Falcon. Full color backlight mechanical gaming keyboard. And then some other information in Chinese. So, not a whole lot going on at the back there. Let's take this opportunity to look at that metal plate. Can you see that there? Maybe. It is decently thick, and you can see that lip there. It's just on the front, and it's bolted on there. And then the rest of it's this wedge-shaped hunk of plastic. It's a pretty hard plastic. Okay, let's talk about the cable here. To my delight, the USB cable is wrapped with a Velcro cable tie. It's another one of those little details that I'm always happy to see. Reusable Velcro cable tie. A simple black plastic cable. No braiding or anything. The end of the cable, the USB-A end, is just your basic plastic molding, no branding or anything on it. Looks reasonably well reinforced, so I expect it's not going to break or fray. And it looks to be a pretty typical length, probably 5 to 6 feet, something like that. Yeah, maybe 5 feet. Certainly sufficient for getting from your desk to your PC. The front of the board, the front lip, you can actually see it has this curved edge to it. And you can see that metal plate there again. It's very solid. And that gives us sort of a nice smooth edge, which I imagine will be nice when typing if you're not using a wrist rest. Otherwise, it's a pretty compact 10 keyless. Well, somewhat. It wastes a bit of space up at the top here, I suppose, and a bit of space down the bottom here. The KMG9 from Aki that we looked at last time was actually more compact. It did have a smaller footprint. Up at the top here we have a, I guess this is the MechanicalEagle or perhaps a Vulcan logo. It looks like it's got some plastic on it actually to protect it, which is nice. Let's pull that off. Yeah, so it's a simple shiny logo. It's perhaps a little bit gaudy, but I like it actually. It's tastefully done in black glossy plastic and chrome embossing. So that's nice. Doesn't look too tacky compared to some other stuff we've seen. And then of course we've got the lock indicator lights in the upper right corner. Caps lock and scroll lock. There is no num lock because there is no numpad. It looks a little strange because it's just the two of them and they're so widely separated, but it looks like there should be another lock key in the middle. But they're spaced relatively well, in sort of relative to this little screw. And those little screws in the top corners I think are fine. They don't detract too much. They're just little silvery screws. So that is the aesthetics of the board. Let's look at these keycaps. So once again, we have a legend that's sort of gamery. It's kind of angular. I don't really like the way they write out caps lock. They abbreviate it strangely. It's like caps LK. I don't know. We've seen this keycap set before, I think, an identical keycap set. I'm pretty sure it was on the MotoSpeed CK104. But it certainly gets the job done. Everything is legible. This is something that I don't talk about very often, but the secondary legends, which are the sort of the secondary functions on the keys here, these are simply printed on. They look like decals, perhaps, in white, whereas the primary legends are, of course, double shot plastic, so they will never wear, but the secondary legends might. Hard to say. Let's pull off a keycap, as is tradition. We'll take the escape. There we are. So you can see, double shot plastic for the primary legend. And then secondary legend in just a decal stuck on there. Keycaps are relatively thick, similar to the other sets we've seen on these kinds of boards. A little bit of contouring to sort of seat the finger comfortably. Very little texturing to speak of. These are actually a little bit smoother than some others I've seen. And ABS, I'm sure, as far as material goes. But they feel good, they feel sturdy. Still not crazy about that legend, but what you gonna do? The switches all the way along. Now Temu Blues on switch duty. and as you can see, it's a standard ANSI layout. Nothing weird going on here, so you could absolutely replace the keycaps if you were so inclined. So, one final thing here. Let's give it the flex test. So there is a little tiny bit of flex, but almost none to speak of. You can hear some creaking. No doubt about that. I think that's the plastic frame creaking against the metal back plate, if I had to guess. But there's really, the flex is completely negligible. It's almost non-existent. It's a bit noisy, but physically it's not moving much at all. So I'd say that passes the flex test. It certainly does feel remarkably solid. I can't quite stress that enough. It is the heaviest 10 kilos I've ever felt. There must be a steel plate inside. Well, maybe it's all from this back plate. It's pretty sturdy looking and pretty thick. But overall, it feels really solid, really well built. I feel like I could probably drop this from like standing height and it would be fine. Like it would just brush it off, no problem. Not going to test that here, but that's the feeling I get. Let's take one quick look at the keys here. So, as is usual, a little bit of wiggle on the large keys. Spacebar, of course, being the worst offender, but it's reasonably well stabilized. It's certainly got stabilizers under there. No, shift is actually very solid. Enter 2. Backspace looking good. I'd say there's less key wobble here than on other boards I've seen. It's nothing outstanding, but it's less. Okay, so how do we want to go about this? Well, why don't we take a look at this board's bigger brother, the Z-88. We will give it the same rundown, the same treatment, and after we've taken a look at both, we will investigate the switch removal process and popping in our own switches. So, next up, the Z-88. And here's the Z-88 in box. Has a very similar aesthetic to the Z-77 that we just looked at, although somewhat perplexingly, this one has right across the front, a big piece of branding that says X-Falcon, which did not appear at all on the Z-77 anywhere, and nowhere on the store page. Nowhere else have I seen this called the X-Falcon. So, who knows? Who knows? Once again, the MechanicalEagle, or perhaps Falcon logo. This weird little seal of approval, sort of shiny holographic sticker. I know that's upside down for you, but it reads Z-88 RGB black, just like the other board. This one does not appear to have anything indicating what kind of switches are inside, unless it's on the back. There we are. So once again, it's checked off green switch, which I find so funny. But as we know, they are Otemu blues. At least I'm assuming they will be on this one too. That's what they claim to be on the store page. And here it looks like it does come in some different colors. RGB black, RGB golden, And then there's a non-RGB version in both black and gold as well. Worth mentioning that there is a non-backlit version of the Z-77 available as well. That's significantly cheaper, as well as a fixed backlight version of the Z-77. I'll talk a bit more about that towards the end of the review when we talk about value and buying options and things. Anyway, otherwise, the back of this one looks very much like the back of the Z-77. The box is, of course, longer to accommodate a longer keyboard, but otherwise, yeah, that's really all there is to see here. I do appreciate this minimalistic packaging, just as I've mentioned for other companies that use similar packaging. I think it's nice and to the point. It looks all right, easy to recycle. My only complaint about this one and its little brother over there are that it's a bit lacking in information, and as I've mentioned several times, the branding is somewhat unclear. Let's open it up. That was loud. And, of course, unsurprisingly, we find the Z-88 nestled within the box in a very similar fashion. Once again, I think it's quite adequately protected. Although this one does appear to lack that foam bag inner layer, or so it would seem. But let's pull this out. Once again, the cable is hidden underneath this bit of cardboard. And once again, our little plastic baggie of goodies. The switch puller, the keycap puller, and more spare switches. Very nice. I don't think we have any compelling reason to go through the user guide this time, because we looked at it last time, and I expect this one's very much similar. The only thing I'm going to check here is the warranty situation. If I can. Oh, come now. Now this is slightly different, actually. And you know what? Shockingly, I don't see anything about a warranty in here. Oh, that's just maddening, because clearly the last one was covered by a 1-year warranty, and it made it quite clear. This one, nothing. Nothing. Well, that is irksome. It's worth a little slap on the wrist, I think, because really, it should say it just like the other one. Anyway, That's a shame. Okay, so warranty, question mark. I assume it's the same as the Z-77, but it doesn't say. Our bag of goodies here, which, yeah, I'm not going to open because it's identical to the previous one. It's 5 spare of Temu blue switches, keycap puller, and switch puller. So let's get right down to business. And I will go through this a little bit faster probably because aesthetically speaking, functionally speaking, this should be very similar to its little sibling. And indeed, it is mostly, but it does have some differences worth noting. Let's start, as we do, with the backplate and the board itself. Like the Z-77, the Z-88 appears to have a solid metal backplate. It's definitely metal, but it is a slightly different texture. It feels more, it's smoother. It's more like an anodized aluminum feel, whereas the last one was more of like a powder coated almost. Not quite powder coated, but it was more textured. And I think this one's maybe a little more prone to fingerprints, just from the way it feels. The treatment on the edges is also different. You might see it catching the light there. It looks like it's got beveled chrome edges, or shiny anyway, silvery beveled edges, which I think looks pretty nice. Try and catch it in the light along the top there. Can I do it? There. So that appears to go all the way around, along the bottom edge there, and over here as well. I think that looks good. I like that. The back, as you can hear, is a plastic, very much like the last board. Interestingly, where the last board was wedge-shaped, this one is almost flat. It's just got a little bit of wedginess to it, but not much. Not much. And the rear is actually quite a bit different as well. Would you look at this? It looks like we have our USB cable. It might even be removable. There you go. It is. So we have a removable USB cable here, whereas on our previous board, the Z-77, it was hardwired on. It was affixed. And not only do we have a removable cable, oops, that was not what I meant to do, that's okay. I'm sure it's fine. With our micro USB on one end, and the USB-A on the other, this USB-A cable looks gold-plated, doesn't it? Maybe it's not, but it certainly looks that way. But the housing on the end is the same. Same reinforced connection, which looks quite sturdy. Same plastic coating and reusable Velcro cable tie. And it looks to be about the same length, I think. So that's interesting that it's removable like that. And moreover, on the back here, we've actually got several cable routing channels. You can just have it coming straight out the top here, like it was by default, but you can also route it down the left or the right side in these channels. And it has little clips to keep, or little lip, really, I don't know what you call those, but to keep the cable in place, and then it comes out the side of the board. I think that's slick. I like that. That's certainly something that this board has over the previous one. However, there are some things I'm noticing here as well. The back has no tribal tattoos, no, pardon the phrase, no tramp stamp, unlike the other one, which I don't know what those little moldings were all about. They looked goofy and out of place. I prefer the back of this one a lot, actually. It's got rubberized feet at the top and bottom for when it's laying flat, whereas I believe the other one only had rubberized feet at the bottom and then the rubberized feet on the pop-out feet, which this one also has, which is great. Pleased to see that. The information on the back is very similar. RGB mechanical keyboard, model Super Scholar Z-88. Yet again, we've got some weird branding. I've not seen it sold anywhere as a Super Scholar. It was nowhere on the packaging. Literally nowhere listed as that. Only here. It's just perplexing. And I think it's so funny. The Z-88, certainly. We've seen that everywhere. But the Super Scholar, that's new. Is it an X-Vulcan? A Super Scholar? MechanicalEagle? E-Element? What is it? All of the above. It's a Z-88. That's what it is. Okay. And whereas our Z-77 had the whatever logo this is positioned up top and center, this board has it right above the arrow key cluster and below the navigation cluster. And this board too has it protected with a plastic film. And it's the same color scheme with the glossy black. The glossy black background and that shiny eagle or falcon. The keycaps are identical, so there's no surprises there. Once again, double shot ABS. A little bit on the slippery side, but they feel solid. And then just those printed legends, secondary legends, I should say, just printed on in white. Now, something that you can't quite gain from just looking at this board, but that I am noticing holding it, is that this board is shockingly lighter than the 10 keyless version. The Z-88 actually, it feels quite a bit more hollow, I must say. It feels less dense, and I'm pretty sure it is a lighter board. And so, for that reason, it does lack a bit of that feeling of solidity that its younger sibling has. I feel less confident about dropping this keyboard from standing height. It doesn't feel bad, but it just doesn't have the same weightiness and the same density to it that inspires that sense of confidence in its build quality. So I find it very interesting, some of the subtle differences between these two models, between what are ostensibly very, very similar boards. Let's let's check the key wiggle. I think this one has a little bit more, actually, for whatever reason. But, once again, nothing egregious. It does feel they feel a bit wigglier to me. I don't know why that would be, but they just don't feel quite as solid. Maybe we'll pop those off and take a look and compare. I might do that on my own time, just for my own information. If I find out that there's something different going on there with the stabilizers or something, I'll let you guys know. But I'm not going to do it right here, right now. What we will do right here and right now is a quick flex test. It's actually a bit less squeaky, I think, than its younger sibling, but a bit less creaky, I should say. But there is a bit more flex to the chassis, and I think that comes from the fact that it's just a bit more hollow. I think that this the metal plate might be a bit thinner, the back plate, although that's hard to tell. And it's also a longer board, so just the aspect ratio of the board or whatever, it's just got more flex to it, if that makes sense. Like, because it's a longer board, it has more opportunity to be weaker in the middle. But all that said, I think this board looks quite handsome. It is actually, in a strange way, more compact because it doesn't have that section up top or that section down below, unlike the Z-77. So actually, the Z-77 is a taller board, although this one is, of course, much wider, but the edges come right up to the edges of the keys on all four sides, pardon me. And the lock indicator lights are nicely spaced up there. Nice little icons, they look good. Overall, a nice subdued design that looks pretty good, I think. And feels pretty good, although it doesn't score quite as highly as the Z-77 in the sort of build quality category. All right, so now that we've looked extensively at both of these boards and picked out some subtle but interesting differences between the two, we're going to take a look at the flagship capability of these boards, which is the switch swapping. So let's take a gander. Okay, so I've brought the Z-77 back out for this part of the video. And what we're going to do is we're going to remove a few switches and look at what we can do for replacing them. Now, I actually did this already. I wanted to experiment with it a little bit to see how everything worked. And I've got some good news and I've got some bad news. We'll get to both of those, but first let's start by removing some switches. So we'll just deal with the arrow keys down here because that'll be nice and easy for you to see. They're very accessible. So we'll pull off the keycaps for starters. There we go. 4 bare Otimu blue switches. Nice and clicky. As you can see, these are plate mounted switches. So mechanical switches come in 2 flavors, 2 varieties. You can get plate mounted or board mounted switches. The plate mounted switches are braced or mounted on a metal plate like this, and then they have contacts that go through and connect with the PCB underneath, whereas board-mounted switches are mounted directly to the PCB, and the plate-mounted ones tend to be sturdier because they're mounted on a metal plate. That's sort of how it goes. So anyway, this board takes plate-mounted switches, clearly. So we've got our little metal remover, switch remover, and it's pretty straightforward to remove these things. It takes a little bit of wiggling, but so you just clamp it on like so. You squeeze. There's little tabs on the switches here that I'm squeezing in, and you pull, and there you have it. One switch out. Might as well pull out all of these for now, just for the sake of demonstration, if I can. Okay. There's another. There's another. And maybe a bit loud, but there we are. So, as you can see, there's a green PCB underneath. The LEDs are on the PCB itself, right? It's not on the switch. So, you can replace these switches with any other switch with clear housing that allows the LED to shine through, and that should be fine. Except you kind of can't, and I'll get to that again in a moment. But so far so good. The switches come out with relative ease, and you can also see in each of those little wells for the switches, there's these sort of sleeves into which the pins on the switch go. So there's that big hole in the middle, which is where the switch anchors to the PCB, and then those two little holes receive the contact pins, and then the LED is up above. So, looking at the switch, you can see all those components, of course. Apparently I'm using this as a pointer. Got the little contact pins. 1, 2. That bigger one in the middle that anchors the switch. And then you can see that these switches are designed with a clear housing on top, and then a hole. I can see it right through on the top of the switch that allows the LED to shine through, because the bottom of the housing is actually a opaque white, not clear. So now, this is where things get somewhat regrettable. I have some Cherry MX switches, some genuine Cherry MX switches kicking around that I thought I would try mounting on here. I've got one right here. It's Cherry MX Black. There it is. The black stem, which is a linear switch like a red. It's just got a higher actuation force. And as you can see, it also has those two pins on the bottom. Those contacts on the bottom. And it looks like it should go in really nicely, doesn't it? Looks like it should just pop in there. Unfortunately, try as I might, I could not get the Cherry switch to mount properly. I tried a variety of Cherry switches. I tried reds, browns, blacks. None of them would mount properly on this board. And that's a bummer, because that means that you're somewhat limited in what switches you can install on here. And I did a little bit of research, and it looks as though Cherry switches, as well as Gatorons and Kale switches, all have slightly thicker contact pins. Can you see that? They're kind of a bit chunkier, a bit thicker, as opposed to the Otimu switches. it pops into focus there. They are a finer contact. The pins are narrower. You see that? I'll put them side by side so you can really see them. So despite having almost identical housings and almost identical characteristics otherwise, the finer pins on the Outemu switch will fit into those little sockets on the PCB just fine. Unfortunately, the thicker pins on the cherry switch do not want to play nice with the sockets on this board. And so that is the bad news. The bad news is it looks like genuine cherry switches as well as Gatoron switches and Kale switches will not work with this board. The good news, of course, is that Outemu switches and a couple of other Chinese clone switches will work just fine. Outemu being the most prevalent of them. I think Gaote switches, which I think are technically Outemus anyway, they're just differently branded, will work, and a couple of others. And I'll show you here just for the sake of illustration. I don't have any loose Outemu switches except for the ones that came with this board. So, you know, we've got here these little guys that we saw earlier, and they pop in there quite comfortably. So again, for the sake of illustration, you just put it in there, you press it in. It's a little bit stiff, but oh, it's gonna make a liar out of me. It did work a moment ago. Let me just take that out and try again. Sometimes the angle is a little awkward here. There we go. So that's mounted in quite comfortably there. Easily. There's another one of those spares. Just take it, pop it in. And there she goes. So that is not an issue, but it does mean you have to be replacing these switches with other Outemu switches. You can buy Outemu switches various places online. They're not impossible to come by. And they are cheaper than genuine cherry switches, so in that respect it's nice, but really, I don't see why this board can't support all of those Cherry MX clone switches as well as the authentic Cherry MX switches. It's just really disappointing, to be honest. And more to the point, it is not advertised or explained anywhere that this is the case. Really, I had to spend a bunch of time, trial and error, trying to cram some cherry switches in there, having no success, and I had to go online, and it took quite a while to find an answer to my question, and it was provided by just a random person, not anything official from the manufacturer. So I just find that disappointing. Technically, does it work as advertised? Yes, but with some limitations that I really feel shouldn't be the case. Could you modify your cherry switches to fit in there? Maybe, but why should you have to, and this is the case I should point out. I'm only showing you the Z-77, but this is the case for the Z-77 and the Z-88 as well. I had no luck getting my cherry switches into either of them. So as far as the removable switch and swappable switch situation goes, it's an interesting idea. It's not super well implemented with these boards, unfortunately. If you're happy with our Timo switches, then, that's great, but it would be nice to see broader switch compatibility with these boards. That being said, I think it's time that we put this board through its paces. We check out the lighting a little bit, and then we'll do a typing test, and we'll do that for both the Z-77 and the Z-88. So let's go take a look. Okay, so here we have the Z-77 board plugged in and showing off its brilliant LED lights. If you see any flicker, that's simply an artifact of the filming. I've done what I can to minimize it, but there is of course no visible flicker in real life. So this board has a very similar LED logic board to others that we've seen. It probably is a shared part, honestly, between this and other RGB boards. It has a few different lighting modes where it has different animations and things like that, and also has a handful of different colors. So let's start off by cycling through the colors. So if we hold down Function and press Delete, we can cycle through those colors. What was that, 7, I think I counted? Sort of the major colors that you would want to see. This is, of course, a plug-and-play board with no software, so there is no way to fine-tune your colors using software. You're kind of stuck with those colors. But they're attractive. The LEDs are nice. If we hold down Function and arrow up and arrow down, we can make the LEDs brighter. That's about as bright as they go, or dimmer, like so. We'll keep them nice and bright. Let's change up our color a little. So let's look at the other modes here briefly. If I hold down Function and press Insert, we have a breathing mode. And we can speed this up or slow this down by holding down Function and pressing the left or right arrow keys. So let's speed it right up. You can see it's breathing much faster now. Slow it down a couple of notches. Let's Function Insert again. Okay, so this is like the game-specific mode. And if we hold down Function and press 1 through 5, we have 5 different presets, which come with different combinations of keys illuminated for different gaming applications. Back to 1. Maybe not particularly useful, but what is useful is that you can hold down Function and press Home, and from here you can see the lock keys are flashing, or the lock indicator lights are flashing, and we can press any keys here now to have those light up and save that to this slot. So if we press Function LR again, or Function Home I should say, it saves that preset, and now we can switch to preset 2, 3, back to preset 1, and you can see it's saved our lighting configuration on a per key basis. So that's not too bad. And if we Function Home, press our keys, you can press them multiple times to cycle through different colors for that key. Switch away, switch back, and it retains those colors. It's not too bad. If you want to reset the entire board, you can go Function Escape. It goes through a fancy little startup animation here, and we press Function 1, and it's returned to the factory default. Reset again. So let's keep stepping through our lighting modes. So this was our breathing mode, our game profile mode. Here we have a multicolor fade mode, where it cycles through all the colors. This is a mode where each key illuminates as it's pressed, which looks kind of neat when you're typing. Maybe I'll do the typing test this way in a moment. This is sort of a rippled color mode. I imagine we can press function delete to change the color that's rippling, and indeed we can. Oh, look, we've got some split color modes. And of course this goofy one that we've seen on other keyboards before. It's just rows of color, random color. Really not a functional lighting mode, but that's okay. The ripples. This one's always fun too. Where rainbow colors ripple outwards from each key as you press it. And this is sort of a area of effect mode, if you will, where you press a key and the keys around it light up in rainbow colors. And then rippling rainbow mode. I can't imagine that anyone actually wants to use this mode or these kinds of modes, these gaudy lighting modes in, regular day-to-day use. It's just kind of distracting. But that's okay, because we have a mix of gaudy modes and some more functional modes like this solid single color lighting mode. So that's what we've got for lighting here on the Z-77, and I expect the Z-78 or Z-88, excuse me, will be very similar. We'll take a look at it in just a moment, but first we'll do a quick typing test on the Z-77 since I've got it plugged in here. It only makes sense, right? So let's switch the lighting mode. Let's switch to something fun. Let's do that. The light up mode. No, you know what? Let's get even a little more extreme. We'll do the ripple mode. Because why not, right? And let's quickly bring up somewhere here that we can type some passages. I have people ask me often what I'm typing in these tests. And I'm going to a website called typeonline.co.uk/copypractice. And it has passages from public domain literature. For instance, this is a passage from A Christmas Carol. And you can just keep refreshing the page and it will keep giving you new passages. It seems like there's a lot. So this is a good opportunity or a good place to just find random stuff to type, I find. Okay, let's see how this thing sounds. So it's pretty loud, as you can no doubt tell. Let's do one more passage with this board before we switch over to the Z-88. This is from a book called Main Street by Sinclair Lewis. Okay, so now that we've had a chance to listen to that and see the lighting effects, let's take a look at the Z-88. And here we've got the Z-88, looking very much like the Z-77 when the lights are off, and we can just see the LEDs. Of course, it is longer, or a wider board, what with the numpad over here on the right, but otherwise very much the same. And it would appear that the lighting configuration options are indeed identical as well. So we'll very quickly just flip through them here to make sure everything's in proper working order. We have our set of 7 colors, just as last time. Variable brightness, looks like 4 or 5 steps, just as last time. And a variety of lighting modes: breathing mode, game profile mode, color fading mode, this key press mode, color ripple, weird squiggly color line, crazy rainbow ripple, which I used last time, or just a moment ago for the typing test. Area light up mode. These aren't their proper names, it's just what I'm calling them. And a rainbow ripple mode. And back to solid color. So, just as one would expect, the lighting logic on this board is in fact identical to the Z-77. Which means that it's time for a typing test on the Z-88. So let's go back to our good old typeonline.co.uk and find a new passage to type. This is taken from News from Nowhere by William Morris. Oh, and let's set up a fun lighting mode here. What shall we do? We did the crazy ripples last time. How about, yeah, sure, we'll do the cluster light up mode this time. All right, let's hear how this thing sounds. we'll do one more for good measure. This is a sample taken from Travels with a Donkey in the Cevennes by Robert Louis Stevenson. Okay, well, you've seen the lighting effects of these two boards. You've heard the typing, had a chance to listen to them in action. I think it's time we reconvene at the conclusion, where I'll give you my final summarized impressions of the Z-77 and the Z-88. And here we are in the home stretch of what has become a very long review. I think this will probably be a record breaker for length here on a relaxing review. But what have we got? Well, we have on our hands a pair of very good keyboards. Good, but not quite great. There are a few things that keep these boards from achieving greatness. But there's a lot of things to like about them as well. So for the summary section here, I'm going to talk about each board separately, starting with the Z-77. And as you guys know, I like to start with the good stuff. So the first thing that I like about the Z-77 is it looks good. It's got pleasing aesthetics, and it resists the temptation to be too gaudy or too flashy, which is something that you commonly see with these lower cost boards. They tend to just not look great. So I think the MechanicalEagle Z-77 looks pretty good. The second thing I like about it, and this actually might be what I like the most, is that it is very solidly built. That thing is built like a tank, and like I mentioned earlier, I'm pretty sure I could drop it or like throw it off a roof or something and it would be fine. Like, it just has very, very solid, dense, hefty frame, and it really does make it feel like a much higher quality, or I should say a much more expensive board than it actually is. It feels very high quality. In that vein, I like the fact that it has double shot ABS keycaps. They're never going to wear out. There's some question about those secondary legends because they look just like decals, but at least the primary legends are never going to wear down on you, so you can rely on those keycaps. The fourth thing I like about the Z-77 is the inclusion of swappable switches. Now, the implementation isn't perfect. We talked about that a bit earlier, and it will come up again in a moment in the not so good things about this board. But nonetheless, considering that it's still a budget board it's a value added feature to be able to swap out switches as you desire with some limitations. And on that note, I think it's also a good thing worth mentioning that this board comes with spare switches, 5 spare switches. So if one of your Outemu blues happens to break, which I've never had happen to me yet, at least, and they are rated for 50 million keystrokes apiece, just like Cherry's genuine MX switches. But if one did happen to break, hey, you've got a replacement. You've got 5 replacements. So that is a nice little value add as well. And finally, I appreciate the fact that this board comes with a 1-year warranty, manufacturer's warranty, and that it is explicitly stated in the package that it comes with this warranty. That's just, you always want that peace of mind. You want to know that when you buy something, if it arrives to you in a broken, or if it breaks within your first year of use, that you can send it back for a new one. So nice to see the 1-year warranty. On to the less good side of things. This is a very short list, but it's something that quite bothered me quite a bit, and that is that Cherry MX switches are not supported by this board. So as I've been talking about all the way along, one of the big selling points of these particular boards is that you can swap the switches as the user. You can easily swap out switches without having to desolder and resolder and anything like that, which sounds like an excellent flexible system, and it should be. But the fact that Cherry's switches aren't supported, the fact that other, significant brands like Gateron aren't supported is a real bummer. And if you have Outemu switches sitting around, or you're happy ordering Outemu switches to swap out with the existing ones on the board, then it's very easy and it's very functional. It works as advertised. But more than anything, I think the manufacturer needs to include a compatibility list, a switch compatibility list that is made very apparent on the Amazon store page for this product, because otherwise you're sort of buying it on good faith, assuming that you're going to be able to use your Cherry MX switches probably, and you can't. So it just feels a bit misleading, or at least like the manufacturer's holding back on that, and they should really be upfront about informing consumers about what switches are and aren't compatible with these boards. Next, we'll run down the Z-88. Despite these boards being very similar in many respects, there are enough differences to warrant these two lists. There's some overlap, but there's some unique items on each list. So the good stuff for the Z-88, I think it looked good, just like the Z-77. It has a fairly reserved design. It's not gaudy. My only concern with it would be those shiny beveled edges around the metal backplate are already starting to show some fingerprints, some little scuff marks. They're starting to look a wee bit grimy. So over the long term, it might be a bit of a pain to care for that way if you have to keep wiping them, but out of the box, at least, I think it looks pretty nice, and I think it's pretty well designed. On that note, it is a fairly compact board for a full-size keyboard. It uses its space quite well, not a lot of wasted space there. So if you're looking for a compact full-size board, this is a good one to consider. Like its smaller sibling, the Z-88 comes with double-shot ABS keycaps, which are going to be very durable and last you for quite a long time. But unlike its younger sibling, it also comes with a detachable USB cable, and the back of the board also has cable routing channels. These are all really nice touches to see. They're just sort of quality of life things, I guess, that are just you don't often see on keyboards at this price point. but they just give you a little something extra. Nice to see. The last two items on the good list are repeats of ones from the Z-77, and that is the swappable switches and the spare switches included. I explained that in the Z-77, so I'm not going to go into that here, but both really great things to see at this price point. So now let's talk about the less good, and again, this is a pretty short list. The first is exactly my same complaint as with the Z-77, is the Cherry MX switches are not supportive, and the manufacturer and the sellers really need to include some kind of switch compatibility list so that people don't waste their time or money on switches that simply aren't compatible with the socket system on this board. The second item, and that is unique to the Z-88, is there is no information on the warranty. And I always harp on this, and you know it's a pet peeve of mine, so of course it was going to get nailed here for that. Whereas the Z-77 was very upfront about its 1-year warranty. There was no information included in the box for the Z-88, no information on the store page either, so no good. Really want to see that warranty information up front. So at long last, we come to the final word. What do I think of these boards? Would I recommend them? Yes, I think they are really good boards, like I mentioned. I think that they have a lot of things going for them. They look good, they perform well, they have some nice convenience features, and they're somewhat unique in that they have those swappable switches. But there's just a couple of details that keep them from being excellent keyboards. And those are, like I've said, the issue with the compatibility of the switches and the uncertainty surrounding that, and the uncertainty of the warranty surrounding the Z-88 board. If you like the looks of these boards and you are fine buying a board and swapping out Outemu switches exclusively, then I have nothing bad to say about these things. Go for it. I think they are excellent, solid, good performing options. I didn't really talk about the LED lighting in the summaries there, but it is, par for the course for these kinds of budget boards. The effects and the quality of the LEDs is all on par. So yeah, totally. If you like the look of these boards, go for it. I think they're both very good. If I had to pick one, personally, I would probably take the Z-77, and that's partially because I have a preference for slightly more compact boards, and also because it just feels so solid. It feels really nice to type on because it's just this solid slab of metal. It really feels like it's going to last a long time. I should mention a couple of things here. As I stated in the introduction, the Z-77 is available at the $45 price point. The Z-88 is available around $50. There are other versions of the Z-77 and the Z-88 too, I believe, that come in at different price points. Critically, if you don't care about backlighting at all, the Z-77 is available for $29 sans backlighting, and that puts it in a very unique price bracket, the under 30 price bracket, where things are really competitive. But a couple of, 2 weeks ago now, I guess, I reviewed a $25 mechanical board from Aki, which I thought was fantastic for the price. For the $4 premium, would I recommend the Z-77? I think it's probably worth it. I think that step up is probably worth it just because it feels so solid, and you get the ability to swap your switches, which is really cool, especially in the under $30 price range. The only caveat here is that I have not tested that particular model, so this is with the caveat that assuming that the version without a backlight is otherwise identical to the version I tested here today, then I would highly recommend it. Certainly worth checking out at the very least, because I think it's a very solid board. There is another intermediately priced version at $35. You can get a version with fixed backlighting. And what I mean by that is they call it multicolor or rainbow or something like that. And each row is a different color. And so it looks like a rainbow. It's got these colorful LEDs, but don't be fooled. You can't change those colors. There's no way to make the whole board one color, for instance. And to me, that's just not acceptable. I want to be able to make the whole board the color of my choice, and to have it fixed as a rainbow at all times, it just doesn't do it for me. So personally, I wouldn't buy that, but I guess if rainbows are your thing and you don't mind that, you could go that route, save a bit of money as well, and still get the backlight. So I just wanted to make you aware of those options as well. So special thanks to Granvela for sending along the MechanicalEagle Z-77 and Z-78 that I reviewed here today. And of course, if either of these boards appeal to you, you'd like to check them out, there are purchase links down in the video description that you can click through on, and I will post ones for both the American store, Amazon.com, and for Canada, Amazon.ca as well. Thank you all so much for watching today. I hope you found this informative, and I hope you found it relaxing as always. And I look very forward to having you back here next time for another episode of relaxing reviews. Bye for now.